morning, Team Alabama. We are ready for a little more in Hunger Games. Please join me in reading on page 58. Add to your facts, add them to your Google Doc, and read along with me, please. Stand over here, both of you, says Hey Mitch, nodding to the middle of the room. We obey, and he circles us, prodding us like animals at times, checking out muscles, examining our faces. Well, you're not entirely hopeless. Seems fit. And once the stylists get a hold of you, you'll be attractive. PETA and I don't question this. The Hunger Games aren't a beauty contest, but the best-looking tributes always seem to pull more sponsors. All right, I'll make a deal with you. You don't interfere with my drinking, and I'll stay sober enough to help you, says Hey Mitch. But you have to do exactly what I say. It's not much of a deal, but still a giant step forward from 10 minutes ago when we had no guide at all. Fine, says PETA. So help us, I say. When we get to the arena, what's the best strategy at the cornucopia for someone? One thing at a time. In a few minutes, we'll be pulling into the station. You'll be put in the hands of your stylists. You're not going to like what they do to you, but no matter what it is, don't resist, says Hey Mitch. But, I begin. No buts. Don't resist, says Hey Mitch. He takes the bottle of spirits from the table and leaves the car. Spirits would be alcohol, okay? So you can add that to your vocab. As the door swings shut behind him, the car goes dark. There are still a few lights inside, but outside it's as if night has fallen again. I realize we must be in the tunnel that runs up through the mountains into the Capitol. The mountains form a natural barrier between the Capitol and the Eastern District. It is almost impossible to enter from the east except through the tunnels. This geographical advantage was a major factor in the district's losing the war that led to my being a tribute today. Since the rebels had to scale the mountains, they were easy targets for the Capitol's air forces. PETA Malark and I stand in silence as the train speeds along. The tunnel goes on, and I think of the tons of rock separating me from the sky, and my chest tightens. I hate being encased in stone this way. It reminds me of the mines and my father, trapped, unable to reach sunlight, buried forever in the darkness. The train finally begins to slow, and suddenly bright light floods the compartment. We can't help it. Both PETA and I run to the window to see what we've only seen on television, the Capitol, the ruling city of Pan Am. The cameras haven't lied about its grandeur. Grandeur is like how gorgeous and pretty everything is, and it's very grand and very affluent. You'll have to look up the dictionary definition of it. If anything, they have not quite captured the magnificence of the glistening buildings in the rainbow of hues that tower into the area, the shiny cars that roll down the wide paved streets, the oddly dressed people with bizarre hair and painted faces who have never missed a meal. All the colors seem artificial, the pinks too deep, the greens too bright, the yellow painful to the eyes, like the flat round discs of hard candy we can never afford to buy at the tiny sweet shop in District 12. The people begin to point at us eagerly as they recognize a tribute train rolling into the city. I step away from the window, sickened by their excitement, knowing they can't wait to watch us die. But PETA holds his ground, actually waving and smiling at the gawking crowd. Gawking means staring. He only stops when the train pulls into the station, blocking us from their view. He sees me staring at him and shrugs. Who knows, he says, one of them may be rich. I have misjudged him. I think of his actions since the reaping began. The friendly squeeze of my hand, his father showing up with cookies and promising to feed Prim. Did PETA put him up to that? His tears at the station, volunteering to wash Hey Mitch, but then challenging him this morning when apparently the nice guy approach had failed, and now the waving at the window, already trying to win the crowd. All of the pieces are still fitting together, but I sense he has a plan forming. He hasn't accepted his death. He is already fighting hard to stay alive, which also means that kind Peter Malark, the boy who gave me the bread, is fighting hard to kill me. Okay, let's see if that stays true. Chapter 5. Rip. I grip my teeth as Vania, a woman with aqua hair and gold tattoos above her eyebrows, yanks a strip of fabric from my leg, tearing out the hair beneath it. Sorry, she pipes in, her silly capital accent. You're just so hairy. Why do these people speak in such a high pitch? Why do their jaws barely open when they talk? Why do the ends of their sentences go up as if they're asking a question? Odd vowels, clipped words, and always a hiss on the letter S. No wonder it's impossible not to mimic them. Mimic means mock and repeat. Vania makes what's supposed to be a sympathetic face. Good news, though. This is the last one. Ready? I get a grip on the edges of the table I'm seated on and nod. The final swath of leg hair is uprooted in a painful jerk. So they're pulling the leg hair off with like wax. I've been in the remake center for more than 3 hours and I still haven't met my stylist. Apparently he has no interest in seeing me until Vania and the other members of my prep team have addressed some obvious problems. This has included scrubbing down my body with a gritty foam that has removed not only dirt but at least 3 layers of skin, turning my nails into uniform shapes and primarily ridding my body of hair. My legs, arms, torso, underarms, and parts of my eyebrows have been stripped of their stuff, leaving me like a plucked bird ready for roasting. I don't like it. My skin feels sore and tingling and intensely vulnerable. But I have kept my side of the bargain with Haymitch and no objections have crossed my lips. You're doing very well, says some guy named Flavius. He gives his orange corkscrew locks a shake and applies a fresh coat of purple lipstick to his mouth. If there's one thing that we can't stand, it's a whiner. Grease her down. Vania and Octavia, a plump woman whose entire body has been dyed a pale shade of pea green, rub me down with a lotion that first stings but then soothes my raw skin. Then they pull me from the table, removing the thin robe that I've been allowed to wear off and on. I stand there completely naked as the 3 circle me, wielding tweezers to remove any last bits of hair. I know that I should be embarrassed, but they are so unlike people that I'm no more self-conscious than if a trio of oddly colored birds are peeking around my feet. The 3 step back and admire their work. Excellent. You almost look like a human being now, says Flavius, and they all laugh. I force my lips up into a smile to show how grateful I am. Thank you, I say sweetly. We don't have much cause to look nice in District 12. This wins them over completely. Of course you don't, you poor darling, says Octavia, clasping her hands together in distress for me. But don't worry, says Vania. By the time Cinna is through with you, you're going to be absolutely gorgeous. We promise. You know, now that we've gotten rid of all that hair and filth, you're not horrible at all, says Flavius, encouraging. Let's call Cinna. They dart out of the room. It's hard to hate my prep team. They're such total idiots, and yet in an odd way, I know they're sincerely trying to help me. I look at the cold white walls and floor and resist the impulse to retrieve my robe. But this Cinna, my stylist, will surely make me remove it at once. Instead, my hands go to my hairdo, the one area of my body my prep team had been told to leave alone. My fingers stroke the silky braids my mother so carefully arranged. My mother, I left her blue dress and shoes on the floor of my train car, never thinking about retrieving them, of trying to hold on to a piece of her of home. Now I wish I had. The doors open and a young man who must be Cinna enters. I'm taken aback by how normal he looks. Most of the stylists they interview on television are so dyed and stenciled and surgically altered they're grotesque. But Cinna's close-cropped hair appears to be natural shade of brown. He's in a simple black shirt and pants. The only concession to self-alteration seems to be metallic gold eyeliner that has been applied with a light hand. It brings out the flecks of gold in his green eyes, and despite my disgust with the Capitol and their hideous fashions, I can't help thinking how attractive it looks. "Hello, Katniss, I'm Cinna, your stylist," he says in a quiet voice somewhat lacking in the Capitol's affection. "Hello," I venture cautiously. "Just give me a minute, all right?" he asks. He walks around my naked body, not touching me, but taking in every inch of it with his eyes. I resist the impulse to cross my arms over my chest. "Who did your hair?" "My mother," I say. "It's beautiful, classic really, and in almost perfect balance with your profile." "She has very clever fingers," he says. I had expected someone flamboyant, someone older, trying desperately to look young, someone who viewed me as a piece of meat to be prepared for a platter. Cinna has met none of these expectations. "You're new, aren't you?" "I don't think I've seen you before," I say. "Most of the stylists are familiar, constants in the ever-changing pool of tributes. Some have been around my whole life." "Yes, this is my first year in the games," says Cinna. "So they gave you District 12, I say. Newcomers generally end up with us, the least desirable district." "I asked for District 12, he says without further explanation. "Why don't you put on your robe and we'll have a chat?" Pulling on my robe, I follow him through the door into a sitting room. 2 red couches face off over a low table, 3 walls of blank, and the 4th is entirely glass, providing a window to the city. I can see by the light that it must be around noon. Although the sunny sky has turned overcast, Cinna invites me to sit on one of the couches and takes his place across from me. He presses a button on the side of the table. The top splits, and from below rises a second tabletop that holds out lunch: chicken and chunks of oranges cooked in a creamy sauce, laid on a bed of pearly white grain, tiny green peas and onions, rolls shaped like flowers, and for dessert a pudding the color of honey. Do they eat this way when they're at home in District 12? No, not at all. I try to imagine assembling this meal myself back at home. Chickens are too expensive, but I could make do with a wild turkey. I'd need to shoot a second turkey to trade for an orange. Goat's milk would have to substitute for cream. We can grow peas in the garden. I'd have to get wild onions from the woods. I don't recognize the grain. Our own tessera rations cooks down to an unattractive brown mush. Fancy rolls would mean another trade with the baker, and perhaps for 2 or 3 squirrels. As for the pudding, I can't even guess what's in it. Days of hunting and gathering for this one meal, and even then it would be a poor substitution for the Capitol version. What must it be like, I wonder, to live in a world where food appears at the press of a button? How would I spend the hours I now commit to combing the woods for sustenance, if it were so easy to come by? What do they do all day, these people in the Capitol, besides decorating their bodies and waiting around for a new shipment of tributes to roll in and die for their entertainment? I look up and find Cinna's eyes trained on mine. "How despicable we must seem to you," he says. Has he seen this in my face or somehow read my thoughts? He's right, though. The whole rotten lot of them is despicable. Okay, Team Alabama, we're going to stop there for today, and we will start again tomorrow. Go ahead and add to your facts or your questions or your vocab. Have a great rest of your day.